Hello everyone. Um, so in this video, we're going to explain about consumption and saving. My name is Daniel, and these are my friends, Shiefanny and Yeremia. So let's begin with the introduction to this chapter. Focusing to this fact, consumption accounts for 70% of aggregate demand, more than all other sectors combined. And fluctuations in consumption are proportionally smaller than fluctuations in GDP. So we can conclude that the consumption makes up a large fraction of GDP, and that is relatively stable. So these are the focuses of our chapter. So in this chapter, we're going to seek to understand the dynamic link between consumption and income and the source of consumption itself. And this is the quick and dirty consumption function. As you can see, that the y now and later represents income from this coming year and rest of your life. And N99 is the lifetime year, which is only an assumption. So here our goal is to maintain a constant standard of living, which means um, constant consumption. So the consumption is constant throughout the years. And this is the graph for early Keynesian theories, which represent the relation of consumption and income. Current consumption and current income moving in lockstep without trying to separate temporary versus permanent changes in income. So we're going to learn about various incomes in this chapter. So this is just an old theory. So this is the modern theory, representing these two graphs. The first figure plots both changes in per capita consumption and changes in per capita disposable income. And the second figure compares consumption this quarter with consumption the previous quarter. So we begin by presenting modern theory and then turn to modern empirical evidence. The life cycle theory and the permanent income theory do well at explaining these two figures. So let's move on to the theory. This is the life cycle theory. So life cycle theory implies different MPC out of permanent income, transitory income, and wealth. And in this theory, we actually assume that individuals try to consume with the same amount each year. So constant consumption, as I mentioned before. Now, these are the numerical illustrations. So, suppose person A starts life at age 20 and plans to work until 65 and will die at 80. So, he will die at 80 with annual labor income $30,000. And we can calculate the working life, annual income, years of life, and annual consumption with this data. We can subtract 20 from 65, which we get 50 years of working life. So this person A will work for 45 years. And then the annual income, we can multiply the yearly income with the rest of his working life, which results in 1,350,000. And then we can calculate the years of life by subtracting 20 with 80, and we will get 60 years. So he will live for 60 years in this assumption. And then the annual consumption, we can calculate it with dividing the annual income or the income for 45 years with his years of life, and then we will get $22,500. And this is the general function. The consumption equals to WL divided by NL and multiplied by YL. And therefore, the MPC is WL divided by NL. Now, we can calculate the MPC now. We have various kinds of MPCs, and this is the permanent income MPC. So the income is actually permanent. So we assume that the income were to rise permanently by $3,000 per year. So we can calculate it by multiplying the increase per year with our MPC, which is WN divided by NL, and we will get the increase of annual consumption by $2,250, and the MPC itself for this permanent income is 75. Now this is the other MPC. This is the MPC out of transitory income. We can calculate the annual consumption increase and the MPC by assuming income were to rise with the same amount, but only for 1 year. So we can calculate it like so. 3,000 times the MPC, which is 1 divided by NL, and you will get the increase of $50, and then the MPC itself is less than 0, very close to 0. The MPC from permanent income is large, but the MPC of transitory income is small, very close to 0, as I mentioned. So let's continue. So this is the basic graph that explains this theory. It illustrates the pattern of consumption and saving. And as you can see there, the black color one is the saving. If you subtract the consumption from the YL, which is the income, and then you will get the remaining income, which will be the saving, and you will save only for your working life. And then after the working life, you will start to use the amount of money that you saved before, which means the saving, as you can see from the blue color over there. So, and then there's one more MPC. It is MPC out of wealth. It should equal the MPC out of transitory income, and therefore it will be very small, just like the MPC of transitory income. And the MPC out of wealth is used to link changes in value of assets to current consumption. There are some evidences that wealthier people have a somewhat lower MPC out of income. So that is all for the life cycle theory, and we will be moving on to permanent income theory, which will be presented by my friend Shiefanny. Okay, thank you.
So now I will explain about the permanent income theory. Consumption is related to a longer term estimate of income, or called by the permanent income, that is stated by Milton Friedman. And about the human behavior, basically there's a statement that said plenty today and scarcity tomorrow or yesterday. But actually, based on the people behavior, they would rather to choose a smooth consumption flow than this statement. So this is not affect the behavior of people. And if we geared it to a longer term, this behavior will same as the life cycle theory. And here is the equation. YP here is then for the permanent or disposable income. And when income goes up, people should decide whether the increase is permanent or transitory. And some of people or some of them might fund it directly based on their condition or occupation. But of course, some of them cannot find it or cannot be sure about the changes that happen to their income increased. And let's say here's about the insensitive. As we know that insensitive is not really permanent because it's only given for a certain period and not for the whole life after that. That's why the incentive is we can conclude it will be included in the transitory one. And according to the LCPIH, LCPIH is life cycle permanent income hypothesis. Consumption will be smoother than income because spending out of transitory income is spread over many years. So in particular, the really large up and down spikes in income generate only modes consumption response. Now, about the consumption under uncertainty, the modern approach. The modern version of LCPIH emphasizes the link between income uncertainty, change in consumption, and it will be more formal approach to consumer maximizations. There's a statement that also said that change in consumption arise surprise change in income. So from this statement we can conclude that basically the change in income will be affect our consumption like that. And the modern approach to the LCPIH begins by formally stating the lifetime utility maximization problem of a representative consumer. The lifetime utility is the sum of period by period utilities. And the opposite one is there is a something that called lifetime budget constraint that will equate the sum of period by period consumption with lifetime resources. And this is the equation of the lifetime utility that is calculated period by period. And here's the additional. The optimal choice is should also equate the marginal utility of consumption across period. Here's the equation. But there is a weakness here that is there is an uncertain at time C here. So because of this uncertainty, people cannot implement it. So they found an alternative that they will equate the marginal utility today with using the expected value of tomorrow. That's why they add E here from this equation. But again, there's a weakness that is for the expected value here isn't or are not observable. That's why there's people called Robert Hall that found this new form of observed consumption, and it become like this form. But because there's a surprise here and the surprise is random, that's why they try to find a solution. They try to combine the surprise here with the rational expectation formula with the equate expected consumption rule, and it leads to this model, the famous model 1. The LCPIH, the traditional model, strikes best. Back, empirical evidence suggests that both the traditional rule of term consumption function and the LCPIH contribute to explaining consumption behavior. And there's actual behavior of consumption exhibit both excess sensitivity and excess smoothness. For the sensitivity here, you can test it by combining the LCPIH with the traditional consumption. Here's the formula, the result from the test. The total change in consumption is like this, and actually the open bracket should be here, not this, sorry for the typo. And there's a equation also about the empirically estimating the equation yields that come out to this result. And if you see here, the number is 0.5. That means that half of consumption behavior is explained by current income rather than permanent income. Liquidity constraint and myopia. Liquidity. It is when permanent income is higher than current income. Consumers are unable to borrow to consume at the higher level predicted by LCPIH. And for myopia here is consumers simply are not forward looking as the LCPIH. And there's a liquidity constraint. It is exists when someone is cannot borrow to sustain current consumption in the expectation higher future income. Let's say the example here is about the student. As you know, that student is limit income because they only depend on their pocket money from their parents, so their consumption is not big as their parents because they should manage it with their income or pocket money. That's why it is a liquidity constraint. But let's say after they leave college and takes a job, of course, because they already have a job, their income will arise and their consumption will also automatically arise like that. And the consumption will be more closely related to current income than implied by the LCPIH. But sometimes the liquidity constraint here is quite important. Why? Let's say about the household, when they should overcome the temporary income drop. Of course, because of the temporary income drop that suddenly happened, they should manage their liquidity or their cash or their expenditure to fulfill the future for their family or their life like that. That's why it's quite important. And the alternative explanation for sensitivity of consumption to current income that consumers are myopic is hard to distinguish in practice from the liquidity constraint hypothesis. And the last one is the uncertainty and the buffer stock saving. People save largely to finance their retirement and also provide inheritance for children. So, because the uncertainty here, some of them will choose to save their money. Our savings are used for a buffer stock that will good or useful in your bad times condition. And income fluctuations is there will be two possibility, but rather than it will increase or decrease. And the income fluctuation here is happen or is used when to create considerable downside risks for the consumer. So they will think about this risk, so they will choose to save for their life in the future. Because if it really happened, the pain that caused by a large drop is really bad. So yeah, it's rather to save first. But not all people want to save their money because some of them will rather to choose to spend all of their money first and think later about the future. So it's really not happen to all people. And if the wealth is below the target, the precautionary savings motive stronger than impatience and try to save the achieved target. But if the wealth is above the target, so the impatience will be larger or stronger than the precautionary savings since that they already fulfill their target. And this effects lead to a much higher MPC than would be predicted by standard LCPIH model. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay, it's now going to be my turn now. Okay, now we are going to discuss about the consumption and the stock market. So, the marginal propensity to consume out of wealth stock market holdings being one part of wealth is small. One estimate is that for households with moderate security holdings, a dollar increase in the value of stock leads to an increase in a consumption of between 5 cents and 50 cents, although most estimates are much lower. In 1997, the value of stocks listed on the New York Stock Exchange, or usually known as NYSE, rose about $1.5 trillion as percent marginal propensity to consume would have increased consumption by $75 billion. So in 1997, the consumption was about $5,500 billion. So this would be a large increase in the first 7 months of 2002, the value of the NYSE, as we can see from 1.5 to 75 and then increasing to 5,500 billion. There's a large increase. So in the first 7 months of 2002, in the value of the NYSE fell by over this period. The stock market matters for consumption, but that the magnitude of the relation is hard to pin down. Okay, next one, there is Baro-Richardo problem. So there are actually two answers about about the return in form of interest or of dividends and capital gains here. So the Baro-Richardo problem is uh, generally discussing about the size of deficit. Does the size of the deficit matter? That is, given the size of government spending, does it matter whether sufficient taxes are levied to pay for what we spend? So there are two answers about this problem. The first answer is the traditional aggregate supply aggregate demand model. Give a clear answer about lower taxes mean higher aggregate demand and higher interest rate, more crowding out and less investment for the future. But there are there is new classical economists led by Robert Barrow that give a surprisingly different answer. Deficit don't matter. And so we are going to discuss about the main theoretical objection. So there are two main theoretical objection. The first, given that people have finite lifetime, different people will pay off the debt than those who are receiving the tax cut today. People now alive do not take into account the higher taxes their descendants will have to pay in the future. So the second one is, it is argued that many people cannot borrow and so do not consume according to their permanent income. They would like to consume more today, but because of liquidity constraint, their inability to borrow due to their permanent income, a tax cut for these people is their liquidity constraint and allows them to consume more. Okay, and this is the graph of consumption falls in the classic Fisher's diagram. So basically, we are discussing about international difference in saving rates. We are going to use this example, yeah, this two table over here. So in the first table, we can see that the run up first in the stock market and then in housing prices led to a large increase in the value of assets, which can be regarded as form of savings. It is useful to look at the different sectors of the economy that saves. We start by looking at government and private saving as in table. In the second table, this table, we have the government save when it spends less than it receives. That is when it runs a budget surplus. Next, we look at the difference between business and personal saving in the United States. So in here we have two formula. So the first one is, we are talking about gross national saving. The gross national saving is equals to government spend saving plus private saving. But the private saving equals to business saving plus personal saving. And this is the graph of US saving as a percent of GDP. Yeah. From year 1960, as we can see the graph, to year 2016. It should be 2016 right here. Yeah. In the late 1991, personal saving as a fraction of GDP declines precipitously for reasons that are not yet clear. At the same time, government saving becomes positive as the federal budget went from deficit to surplus for the first time in decades. Sorry for this misspelling. During the Great Recession, the federal budget hit an unprecedented peacetime deficit, but personal saving rose significantly. Demographic factors such as a large senior citizen population account for some difference. It is also easier to borrow in the United States than in most other countries. So that's all from us. I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for the attention.